Hi everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at chapter 22 of the Eutropius Breviarium, book 3, which is talking about Hannibal and the Second Punic War. So like we've been saying for the past few videos, we're really in the end game now of the war. Things have really shifted away from all the other theaters. Italy has been basically won over by the Romans. Spain has been won by Scipio Africanus, and everything has shifted to North Africa and Scipio's African campaign. So you might remember in previous chapters, we learned that the Roman Senate had made Scipio a consul. They gave him an army. And they shipped him to North Africa with the intention of kind of bringing the fight to the Romans. And we said this is really mimicking Hannibal's strategy, right? So Hannibal's reason for fighting in Italy was to kind of bring the fight to the Romans' doorstep, try to influence their allies, their supply chain, all these things. North Africa has not really been impacted in that way in the war so far. But Scipio is going to use that tactic now where he's not going to attack Carthage. He's going to go on a campaign through the country and kind of taking out key allies, key cities, and kind of making them, starve into submission, basically, or at least try that and wear them down. So that's where we are in the narrative right now when we're building up to the moment where Scipio and Hannibal are going to have to fight each other. So chapter 22 starts like this. You have interim Hannibale veniente ad Africam pax turbata est, multa hostilia ab Afris facta sunt. So interim just means meanwhile. So you have meanwhile with Hannibal coming, right? With the coming of Hannibal, you have this ablative absolute. Or we could even say with Hannibal having arrived or come to Africa. Peace, pax, turbata est. It's a perfect passive verb. Peace was disturbed, right? It was kind of jumbled up. So you remember the Carthaginians in response to Scipio and his campaign had recalled Hannibal, right? So Hannibal is not going to be in Italy anymore. He's coming back to face Scipio. And because of this, it's throwing off the peace process that they had just laid out. So in chapter 21, you might remember that they had tried to make peace, but it kind of felt like maybe they were stalling for time, but they'd made this truce. Now it's all thrown into confusion, right? That's what Eutropius is getting at with pax turbata est, because how are you actually going to have a peace treaty when you're bringing an army from Italy, right? The arrival of Hannibal throws everything into confusion. So you have multa hostilia, right? Many hostilities, you might say, facta sunt were made by the Africans. So notice here where Eutropius is laying the blame, right? He's saying specifically that the problem for the peace is because of the Carthaginians, right? Not because of the Romans. Is this true? Probably not, but he is framing the narrative in that way to make it seem like, the Romans wanted peace and they were willing to offer a peace treaty, but then Hannibal showed up, who saw this coming? And now they have all this hostility, right? Multa hostilia, all these things, and he specifically labels it as by the Africans, meaning the Carthaginians. They were done by them, right? He's leaving the Romans out of it. So he's definitely laying the blame of why peace didn't happen directly on the doorstep of the Carthaginians and Hannibal. Okay. Then you have legati, tamen eorum, ex urbe venientes a Romanis capti sunt, sed jubente Scipione dimissi. So you have the envoys, however, of them, eorum, right? Meaning their envoys, ex urbe, from the city, right? So remember, these are the envoys that they had sent to Rome. So the city is, of course, Rome here. They're coming back is kind of the idea. So it's saying their envoys, right? Legati eorum, venientes, literally coming back from the city or coming from the city. Capti sunt, they were captured. There's your perfect passive verb. They were captured by the Romans. So the timeline here is they talk about having peace. Scipio and the Senate, they give this 45-day treaty to figure it out. The envoys go to Rome. Now they're coming back, but things have been so jumbled by the news that Hannibal's coming that now the Romans can't really trust the Carthaginians anymore. So they capture their envoys, right? The legati capti sunt, right? But with the, you could say, by the order of Scipio, right? Jubente Scipione, with Scipio ordering this, right? It's an ablative absolute. Because of the orders of Scipio is kind of one way to do it. They were sent away, right? Dimissi is really dimissi sunt. It's picking up from capti sunt, that same perfect passive form. So on the orders of Scipio, they were dismissed. So they get captured, but Scipio lets them go, right? He doesn't hold on to the envoys. Then you keep going. You have Hannibal, quoque frequentibus proeliis victus a Scipione petit etiam ipse pacem. So here we have a little bit of, it seems like a little confusion from Eutropius, but we'll take it for what it is. It says Hannibal, right, quoque also, victus, right, Hannibal having been conquered, frequentibus proeliis, in frequent battles, right? There's your ablative. So right off the bat, we have kind of an odd thing here. because you're saying that he's been conquered, right? That perfect passive participle implies this already happened. So it's saying, having been conquered in frequent battles by Scipio, a Scipione, Hannibal pedit pacem, right? So Hannibal sought or looks for, or he also, etiam, looks for peace, pacem, and ipse is the intensifier himself. So saying Hannibal himself also looked for peace. Now, this is a little disputed. So Livy doesn't mention anything about this, any battles before the Battle of Zama involving Hannibal and Scipio. So I'm not sure where Eutropius is kind of referencing here. From what I remember of it, I don't think there were any engagements between Scipio and Hannibal before the Battle of Zama, their big fight. But Eutropius seems to be a little confused here. I'm sure there were skirmishes between Carthaginians and Romans in Scipio. I just don't think Hannibal was the one leading the charge. So you have a little bit of a confusing line here, but you can kind of take it for what it is. It's talking about the peace treaty idea coming back into play. So now we continue on, and you have cum ventum esset ad colloquium istem conditionibus data est quibus prius aditis quingentis milibus pondo argenti centum milibus librarum propter noam perfidiam. So you have a long sentence here, right? But it starts with a cum clause. And it's temporal. You're saying when he had come, right? So ventum esset, right? So this form, the ventum esset, is really pluperfect passive. Okay, so you can kind of translate it as pluperfect active if you want. It's impersonal. So in some commentaries, they'll tell you to translate this as when they had come, because you're talking about Scipio and Hannibal. However you want to do it is totally fine. But the idea is when they'd come to the conference, the colloquium, right? And it's istem conditionibus, so on the same conditions, right? There's your ablative. You have data est, which means it was offered, right? And what they're talking about here, the implied word is really pax, right? Peace. So it's saying peace was offered on the same conditions, and it means the same conditions that the Romans had laid out earlier. So you remember that the first round of conditions was that they'd limit the navy and that the Carthaginians were going to have to pay 500,000 pounds of silver, right? So a lot of war reparations is the idea. So again, they offered peace, meaning the Romans, right, offered peace. But in this case, you're saying peace was offered on the same conditions, right? And you have on which before, right? You have aditis pondo. So you have this ablative absolute happening here with the aditus, right? And it's really going with centum milibus, right? That's really where the ablative absolute is happening. So you're saying with having been added, right, is kind of one way to do it with aditus, centum milibus, 100,000, right? So 100,000 pondo argente, pounds of silver. Then you have your dative, quingentis milibus, to the 500,000, okay, the quingentis milibus. So what's happening here is it's saying, the original offer was 500,000. That's the quingentis milibus. He's saying on top of that, now, right, it's the same offer as before, but we're going to add aditus milibus, right? We're adding 100,000 on top of the 500,000 pounds of silver we've already discussed. Right, and librarum there is pounds, right? So it's going with the same kind of idea of pondo, right? The weight of silver. It's saying we're adding another 100,000 pounds to it, propter noam perfidiam, on account of the new treachery, right? So the new treachery is kind of an interesting form. It's or an interesting reference rather. It's talking about the fact that the Carthaginians delayed this peace process on purpose. The Romans are saying, we know what you did. You brought Hannibal back, and now you're kind of delaying this whole thing out, and you've been attacking us. No, if you want peace now, we're adding an increased amount of silver to the price. And again, the quibus prius at the beginning, you really have an ellipsis happening here. It's really saying like on which peace had been given before is really what it's doing. So again, it's saying we're offering you this new peace term on the same conditions, right, on which peace had been offered before, but we're going to add this. That's where the ablative absolute is coming into. It's like, yeah, we'll offer it to you, but after this has already happened, we're adding 100,000 pounds more of silver because we can't trust you, is kind of the idea. Then you continue. You have Carthaginiensibus conditiones displicuerant userant que Hannibalem pugnare. So the conditions, the condiciones, right? These conditions, they displicuerant, rather. They were displeasing or displeased the Carthaginians, right? Carthaginiense here is dative. So it's saying this was displeasing to them, right? They're not accepting this. Okay. And it's because they're not going to pay more than they've already been offered. So it was displeasing to the Carthaginians, and they ordered Euceront, right? The que is the and. So the Carthaginians ordered Hannibal, right? Hannibalem, to fight, pugnare. So the response from the Carthaginians is, this is not acceptable, right? We're not going to pay you more than we already kind of had in the first discussion, and now it's time to fight. And what you're really seeing here is, in reality, neither side probably wanted to actually have peace. The Romans are looking for the knockout blow, right? So it's sort of like, let's throw out this huge offer, and if you take it, that would be great, right? You'd be kind of dumb to pay us this much money and limit your fleet. It would be a win for us, and we wouldn't have to fight you, but we're kind of anticipating you're not going to do it. On the same side, the Carthaginians never really seemed to be interested in peace because they wanted Hannibal back the whole time. So it's this fake kind of peace treaty where it's like, yeah, we'll talk. They're delaying. Now they have Hannibal back, and they're like, nope, we're good. We're not going to take your peace treaty. Instead, we're going to fight, right? So that's what they do. They tell Hannibal to get his army and fight. Then you have infertor a Scipione et Massinissa alio rege numidarum, qui amicitiam cum Scipione fecerat Carthagini bellum. So the real subject here is all the way at the end. It's bellum, war. So war is waged, infertor, right? You have this passive verb. So it's war was waged by, and again, the passive, you need the ablative of agent. Here it is. It's by Scipio and by Massinissa, right? So Massinissa is a new name, but an important one. And he's described as alio rege numidarum, another king of the Numidians. So remember, the first Numidian king was Syphax, who they get rid of, right? They send him to Rome. This is the new one. Massinissa is going to play a role later on in Roman history in the area. So he's an important kind of ally. But now, right, he's allied with Rome, and they describe him as the alio rege numidarum, right, the other king of the Numidians, who, qui fecerat, had made amicitiam, had made friendship, cum Scipione, with Scipio, right? So war was waged Carthagini on the Carthaginians. So now this is an interesting turn of events. The Numidian cavalry has always been kind of a strong suit and an ace up the sleeve of Hannibal and the Carthaginians, right? They have this very fast, mobile, and very effective cavalry, and the Romans really haven't had a great answer to it. Now that they've gotten rid of Syphax and brought Numidia into the fold, now they have a new king, Massinissa, who's allied with them, and they have their own Numidian cavalry, right? So this is kind of an important turn where now the Romans have a counter to something that has been the Carthaginian strength throughout the war, right? So now they have Numidia on their side, and they're going to wage war together against Hannibal. Now we get to the end of the chapter. You have Hannibal, tres exploratores ad Scipionis castra mise, quos capto Scipio circumduci per castra usit ostendique his totem exercitum mox etiam prandium dari timitique ut renuntiarent Hannibale quae apud Romanus vidissent. So another very long sentence, right? But it starts with Hannibal. There's your subject. So Hannibal sent mise tres exploratores, right? 3 scouts or spies, you might say. Explorers is kind of what it would be in English. But he sent 3 scouts to the Castra Scipionis, to the camp of Scipio, right? So he sends 3 spies out. And their spies, quos captos, whom, having been captured, right? Or who captured, having been captured, you might say, Scipio, he used it. So Scipio ordered circumduci, of a passive infinitive, to be led around per castra, through the camp. So the 3 explorers go out, they get captured, right, quos captos, and then Scipio orders them to be led around through the camp, which is kind of interesting. And not only led through the camp, but Scipio ordered them ostendi, right, to be shown everything, totem exercitum, the whole army, his, to them, right? So it's saying Scipio ordered them to be led around and to show them to be shown the whole army, right? So he's showing them what's going on, which is kind of an interesting event here of taking the spies and being like, yeah, come check out the camp, right? Not only that, but you have mox etiam, soon also, right? He ordered, is kind of the idea, them to be given prandium dare, right? To be given lunch, right? A meal, and dimitique, right? Dimiti, to be sent away, okay? So he's bringing them into the camp, right? You think spies you'd want to kill, but no, he brings them into the camp. He shows them around. He shows them his entire army. He gives them a meal, and then he sends them on their way. So you might be wondering why you would do this, and Eutropius answers it with a purpose clause, right? The ut clause here, right? So the reason he does this is so that they might report, renuntiarent, right? That they might report back to Hannibal, the things which, right? Quae, the things which we dissent they saw, right? There's it's the end of your purpose clause there. But we dissent is your pluperfect subjunctive, right? So it's the things which they had seen, you might say, among the Romans, apud Romanos. So when you take this whole event together, it's kind of an interesting bit of, I guess, sort of psychological warfare by Scipio. So Hannibal knows they have to fight. He sends spies. Scipio brings them in. He shows them everything, and then he sends them back. He wants them to tell Hannibal what they saw. Now, this is really just a psychological trick, right? It's like, come look how great our army is, how big it is, all these different things. Scipio is kind of throwing it in Hannibal's face, like, yeah, come back. And he's probably showing them very specific things, but the idea is he wants to portray his strength to Hannibal, and he uses Hannibal's own spies to do that. So it's kind of an interesting way to set up the final battle that we're going to see to end this story and end the Second Punic War, which is chapter 23, the last one. So hopefully this made some sense and you're able to read through it and process as you went. If you have any questions at all, again, put them in the comments below. I'd be happy to help you. But the key to this, I always tell you, is to know the vocab, right? So practice the vocab as much as you can and read it as many times as you can. You might want to do sort of a second reading or a third reading. But as you read, you want to mark down any problem areas you have. Maybe it's the vocab tripping you up, the grammar. Then you want to go look those up, kind of shore up those gaps, and then read it again. And the more you read it, having practice, the easier it should be, and you'll be able to really appreciate this for what it is. You don't want to get too stuck in just translating word for word. You do want to actually read the whole thing. It's meant to be, like a narrative and a story, and you'll appreciate it if you kind of read it aloud. And if you can find someone from class who can read it back to you so you can listen, that would be ideal too. But either way, just keep working at it. You're almost to the end of the Eutropius story. We really only have one chapter left, the famous Battle of Zama, when these two generals and in a lot of ways equals are going to battle it out. But otherwise, hopefully you're feeling pretty good about it and you're getting better at it as you go, right? And appreciating Eutropius. Good luck.